Mr. Rowbury, thanks very much for your time today. And first question to you, please tell us about yourself, and especially how you have been related to Japan.
I first came to Japan about 34 years ago when I was a teenager for high school. And my first job out of university was in Japan as a banker in the securities and finance industry. And then about 15 years ago, I moved to the public relations industry, where I'm working now as president of Edelman. So I've had quite a long history here in Japan and seen the period before the bubble, and after the bubble. So it's been quite an exciting ride.
And the question two is, how do you think Japan has changed after 3/11 in terms of people, societies, communities, and politics and businesses? What are your opinion?
I think that the past 20 years for Japan has been a very difficult period since the bubble. And there are a number of issues that have arisen over that 20 years. But I think perhaps one of the biggest issues was a crisis of confidence. Japan had lost a little bit of confidence in itself. Many companies stopped coming to Japan and preferred to go to Shanghai or Singapore. I think we see young people today perhaps not being able to have the ability to have big dreams for the future. And so there was really just a general, I think, environment of a crisis of confidence and a confidence that Japan could be a very vibrant and strong economy. And that led to people very confused about the future course that Japan should take. As a result of the very sad tragedies that we saw in 3/11, we saw a couple of things happen. The first one is, I think, getting over those tragedies and having the world look to Japan and say that Japan is a model for the way that society reacted in that, helped build a little bit more confidence in people. We saw the world really come to Japan's aid. And a lot of people around the world think a little bit about more Japan. And I think what has happened is we've begun to see Japan rethink itself a little bit. And perhaps it's improved the confidence. It's certainly raised awareness of Japan around the world. And hopefully that can be something that we can build on going into the future. So I think it generally contributed to a rise in the confidence. And that in Japan, we can do it.
How do you think has a disaster, 3/11 disaster, impacted on this country courses, as you said, the losing confidence or something else?
I think it was a direct result of the disaster was, of course, the regaining of a little bit of confidence. But I think also what we have seen is it has provided a very needed trigger for Japan to perhaps rethink itself. And while we're still not seeing too much action, at least we are seeing a lot of people, including, of course, Hori-san from your organization, who are really thinking about what they can do, what they can contribute, and what the future vision for Japan should be. And so I think while there's always a silver lining, even though it was a tragic and dreadful disaster, the silver lining here is it has triggered a lot of people to think about the shape that Japan of the future should be.
Even though we have some confusions, do you see some or any positive changes or progresses in this country from your viewpoint, if any?
I think we're certainly seeing, as I said, the rising up of people who perhaps before the disaster would not have taken action, begin to take action, not just to criticize, not just to think like a commentator, but to actually start taking action in bringing people together to think about how things should happen. We're seeing initiatives in things like innovation, We're seeing people think about what the education system should look to be like. So the fact that it provided a trigger for that, I think, is very positive. It's also caused a lot of confusion. And as we saw in our own survey, the Edelman survey, it's caused a lot of people to lose trust in a lot of traditional institutions in Japan. But I don't think that that is necessarily a bad thing, because what that does is it causes those institutions to think about how they need to change and how they need to evolve. So generally, I think things are heading in the right direction, but we're just at that stage at the moment where people are trying to determine which direction it should be. There's maybe 20 different directions that things could be heading into, and they're trying to determine which one is the actual right one for Japan in the future. But in that sense, I think overall we are seeing some positive movements arising out of this.
And on the contrary, what are the most important Kaizen points? What needs to be fixed or changed to recreate and rebuild Japan?
The recreation and the rebuilding as triggered by the disaster will be something that will be, and I don't think it should be just a rebuilding of Japan. I think it should be a reinvention of Japan. And that entails a couple of things, and I'll talk about it on two levels. The first one is directly related to the reconstruction of the Tohoku area. And I think we need to have some leadership that can give a vision for what that reinvention needs to look like. I think we do have a little bit of a crisis of leadership at the moment. And so what seems to be happening is the local governments are taking the leadership, and yet they really don't have the resources and perhaps the ability to implement big picture changes. So I think we need to develop some sort of a process whereby the national government can take greater leadership in inspiring those visions and getting that leadership going. And that's with getting that reinvention going with regard to Tohoku. But at a more deeper level, there were some pre-existing issues that Japan had. And one of those issues is, how does Japan globalize? I think Japan, and it was perhaps a cause for the lack of confidence, has always been a very strong domestic market. We made very good products, sold them overseas, and they were very good manufactured products that had very little competition. The world has changed. The Japanese economy is getting older, the Japanese people are getting older, the economy is getting more mature, and we're seeing a lot more competition in manufacturing from other countries. And so there's a new dynamic that Japan has to start adjusting to. And I think that adjustment has been very slow. And that's changes in the way the education system works. It's preparing young Japanese that their greatest contribution to Japan may not necessarily be within Japan. Mm-hmm. It may be being outside Japan but contributing as a Japanese person to Japan. I think we need to start thinking about what those possibilities and what those scenarios are and start planning with things, particularly the education system, about how we start preparing the young people. I saw something in the Nikkei the other day that said 50% of university students who graduate can't get a job in their first year. That is a disastrous statistic. It means that young people can't have dreams and are struggling from the day they graduate from university. And I think that's something we need to change. And that will require a change in mindset from a domestic-based manufacturing economy mindset to a more global, perhaps, mindset.